Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and this is another episode of Ask the Lawyer. Today, we're going to ask the lawyer about something we probably all own at least one of. I know we have several at my house. Talking about bicycles, and you may not realize that sometimes they can be dangerous, specifically injuries from bikes that are defectively and manufactured incorrectly. Here to answer our questions is attorney Trent Shuping of the Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta. Trent, thank you for making some time for us today. I appreciate it.
Hi, thanks, Rob. Good to be here.
So let's start off. I've heard about strict liability. Now, can you explain to us what that means when we're talking about a defective product case?
Sure, Rob. The history of product development is all fairly recent in the development of the law. A lot of it actually came to us only just in the last 50 or 70 years, which is makes it sort of rather new. The concept of strict liability means that there are certain things that a manufacturer of a bicycle can do, or certain defects for which they'll be held what we call strictly responsible, which means you don't necessarily have to show that they were negligent. So, for example, if a product is negligently manufactured and the frame of a bicycle breaks, you don't necessarily have to show what went wrong in their manufacturing process. And in fact, you may not necessarily need to show that there is anything wrong with the way they manufactured it. It's just simply a policy choice that we've made that says that if a manufacturer creates a bicycle frame, they're almost making that guarantee, if you will, that the frame is going to be free of any defects, that the frame is not going to crack while you're using it. And it comes into play in different ways depending on what the particular claim is based on. There's generally three types of products liability claims. There's a claim based on a product that's not manufactured correctly. So that would be, for instance, like I mentioned, if you have the frame of a bicycle suddenly cracks and creates a problem for someone. There's also another kind of claim, which you see a lot of, which are design defect claims, and those are slightly different. And in those claims, what the claim is based on is that the company, the manufacturer, just didn't properly take into account all the factors that they should have when they designed the bicycle. And so it doesn't matter that they made it exactly the way they intended to make it. It was a problem with the design, and they didn't make it as safe as they should have made it.
So that would be example, say, if there's like sharp edges of metal or something like that. Would that be fall into that category?
Exactly. That's a very good example. So, for instance, if you have a bicycle where the manufacturer meant to have a smooth, polished edge, and instead they accidentally or for whatever reason produced a bicycle that had a sharp metal edge and someone was cut, that would be a manufacturing defect. On the other side, if you have a manufacturer who intended for that part in their schematics and their diagram when they drew it up, they intended for it to have a sharp edge, that would be a design defect because they intended to do that, but it certainly obviously wouldn't be safe.
How does a regular user know whether an issue was an actual defect in the manufacturing or something they did user error?
Well, that's a good point. It can be very difficult for a user to pinpoint what exactly the problem was. One common accident scenario that you see is that bicycles that are sold by big box retailers like Walmart or Target, even certain larger sporting goods type stores, they're assembled by the retailer. So if you go to Walmart, the bicycle that you buy assembled was likely assembled by a Walmart associate. And as you would imagine, there's a great degree of skill as it varies from maybe store to store and person to person in how well the bicycle is put together. So for instance, it's not uncommon that someone purchases a bicycle and the handlebars come loose and cause them to wreck. In that instance, it wouldn't necessarily be a manufacturing defect. It could actually be the retailer who's responsible because they failed to properly manufacture the bike. The most important thing in terms of how do you find this out is that you really need to consult with the experts. There are people that can help do that. There's all kinds of things ranging from just a simple inspection of the bicycle by a bicycle mechanic to very advanced high-edge metallurgical studies, looking at things under microscopes that you can do. And particularly if it is a manufacturing defect, it oftentimes is the case that you will need to do some of the high-tech testing to find out what went wrong with this product, where did the crack occur. And the experts who do this for a living are very sophisticated in finding out this. And they can, for instance, look at a crack sometimes and tell which direction it grew from. They can tell how long it's been there and tell us a lot of things about that accident.
I know when I think back to my childhood and I have boys, they can be rough on a bicycle. They aren't exactly treating it with kid gloves. I would imagine these days with video being much more prevalent, it might make it a little easier for somebody in your position who's trying to gather some evidence of whether it was improperly manufactured or improperly used. Makes it easier for you to figure that out sometimes?
Sure, and video is always helpful, and yeah, it's an interesting point that you mentioned because it's true. Certainly, children and really a lot of folks can be sort of rough on their bicycles sometimes. But at the same time, that's something that we know. That's
Right.
as you mentioned, from the time that you were a boy, people have been rough on their bicycles, and so a safe bicycle should be one that's designed that will hold up to whatever kind of abuse the normal, child or normal teenager, or even an adult who likes to maybe ride aggressively can dish out to it.
What about bicycles that might be made overseas? Does that make things more difficult when it comes to finding out who's responsible and getting some redress?
It does. It can make things very very complicated because if the manufacturer does not have any type of United States presence, it can be very difficult. And the reality is that the great large majority of bicycles that are sold in the United States are made overseas, regardless of the brand or regardless of a brand that may sound like it's an American brand. And it's important in those cases. I think that's one of the main one of the main sort of purposes we serve in these types of cases is finding out who the potential defendants are, because it certainly doesn't matter if you get a verdict or a judgment against the company, but you have no ability to collect it.
Right.
Now, fortunately, the law doesn't always just go to who owns the factory that was made in. A manufacturer doesn't necessarily always have to physically assemble the actual product. So, for instance, a manufacturer may be someone who makes the product choices and decides to, comes up with a design and then tells a factory in China to build it to those specifications. So it's not always as grim as it initially may seem when you consider the fact that so many bikes are made overseas and made by companies that don't have a United States presence. But it's certainly something to take care of and something that an experienced bike lawyer will be able to look into and make sure that you get the right people in the lawsuit or that the right people in the claim.
It occurs to me a lot of bicycles are sold on a secondary market. I mean, it may be as simple as you buy it at a garage sale, or I sell one of my bikes to somebody else. Do I have any responsibility in that case if they're injured on a bike that I sold them, or is it's sold as is and I don't have any responsibility then?
Well, if you resell a bicycle, you won't have any of the liability that, say, a manufacturer would have. So if there's some sort of latent defect, the crane fracks, anything like that, you certainly would have the duty of ordinary care, which is what we all owe, to one another. And so, for
Right.
instance, if you had some particular knowledge that this bicycle was dangerous and you sold it to someone, particularly if you misrepresented it and said, "Oh, there's no problems with the bicycle," then you might have some cause for concern. And probably with good measure, I think we'd all agree that if you did such a thing, you might deserve to be responsible for that. That said, someone who owns a bike who's not aware of any problems with it or anything like that and resells it has absolutely nothing to worry about. If there's a defect or a danger that's unknown to that person, then they have no responsibility to do anything other than pass along what they know.
So let's say I've purchased a bicycle, something happens, I'm injured, or one of my children is injured, and I suspect this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem like it should have happened. What is the process? What do you recommend people do? Walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. I think one of the sort of most important things to do, and I know this can be difficult sometimes, obviously, something like that, depending on the severity of the accident, can just truly rock a family's world. And it's very hard to do this. But to first make sure that you preserve the bicycle as best you can, that you not do anything to change it. And for instance, we had a case one time where the family obviously went to the hospital with their daughter who was very gravely injured. But luckily, one of the neighbors had the right thinking to go ahead and secure the bicycle and make sure that it was kept in the same condition that it was in. And that allowed us to go ahead and successfully pursue a claim against the manufacturer who had made the dangerous bicycle. So you want to make sure that you preserve that type of evidence. You make sure that you don't change a bicycle, don't throw it away or whatever. And again, that can be terribly difficult. And certainly, obviously, if you have a bicycle that's injured you or a family member, you may not even want to see it or have it in your house. But just make sure that you get it maybe to a lawyer's office, to a friend's house where they can keep it secure. And then the second thing you probably want to do is consult with a lawyer who has experience in these types of cases, who can go ahead and evaluate it, who knows what type of investigation needs to be done, what type of experts need to be consulted. And that's one of the things that in the cases we've handled, we've been able to do is to look at the case and find out, why did this happen? Who, if anyone, is responsible? And it's not always the case. Sometimes indeed accidents do happen, and there may not be a manufacturer, or a retailer, or a seller who's responsible. Other times there are, and I think one of the services that we provide to people who consult with us oftentimes is just giving them the peace of mind. And certainly, if there is a claim, if there is someone who's responsible for putting an unsafe product out there, then we're absolutely ready, willing, and able to help that person pursue a claim. Other times there may not be,
Right.
and in that case, we simply are able to give parents or loved ones maybe a peace of mind that they've done everything. This has been investigated, and there's simply no further steps to take from a legal perspective.
And is this the kind of case that a firm like yours would handle on a contingency basis?
It is. The reality of a case like this is that they can often get very expensive and require a lot of fees, and it would be simply impractical for almost anyone unless they're extremely wealthy to pay hourly attorneys' fees, to pay for experts, to pay for investigation, to pay for the fees of litigation and the expenses that are associated with that as they go along. And so what we do is that if there's a case where we think we can help someone, we partner with them, and we have the resources to fight these fights. And so the client doesn't know it's anything unless we're able to recover. That frankly that seldom happens. We take cases that we believe in and we work them hard, and
Right.
we've had good results and are able to recover. And then at the back end, once we recover for a client, we're able to take that money at the end and use that to cover the fees and the expenses. And then obviously the client maintains the bulk of that and is able to recover and use that to hopefully offset some of their injuries and some of their loss.
Right. Trent, thank you so much for your time today, and there's some helpful information. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. My pleasure.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been Trent Shuping of the Atlanta-based Warshauer Law Group. If you want more information, the best information about bicycle accidents, and or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, please visit askthelawyer.com, and also take a minute to click on the button at the bottom of the screen and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. I'm Rob Rosenthal with askthelawyer.com.